There we go. The sound of recording in progress. All right, we're back. We're recording. We're not live, but we're recording. And welcome back to another episode of Pop Archives. I am Sam, your Pop Archivist, and with me today I have someone who is a expert in the magics and gathering of thereof. Gathering of Yeah, okay, I don't care. I'm not editing anything in this. It's too much work for me.
We're
Magic
doing it live.
Gathering.
Let's go.
Yeah, we're doing it live. It's fine. The magics and the gathering thereof. May I present Allie Alvis. Welcome to the show.
Lovely to be here.
You'll regret that later. Don't worry.
Yeah, I would hesitate to call myself an expert, but as many people have assured me, you don't have to be good at your hobby to enjoy it very much.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like in the course of a lot of this, in a lot of the interviews that I'm setting up, everyone has become kind of an expert in their own weird way, because you kind of have to be in order to talk with any kind of expertise or knowledge or whatever. Like even something like Magic the Gathering, which is a game I hear people play.
A few people play Magic.
So I know that like my sister's ex played it a lot or whatever, but no, it's a very popular card game from Wizards of the Coast, and I became very aware of you online because we have some mutual connections. One, Miss Dr. Emily Friedman, who was very excited when I told her you were going to be on the show. And you regularly take magic cards and examine them for what they offer in ways of libraries, books, and archives, which appeals to my geeky ass heart so much. So that's why you're here, but also because you're a cool person and I wanted to talk to you. That's like ostensibly, like that's the underlying current of this show, is just like I want to talk to cool people, so this is the way I make friends now.
I love it.
Yeah. So for those who may not know of what you necessarily do online, do you want to give them kind of like a quick intro to you and your work, Allie?
Sure. Online I'm generally known as Book Historia. I kind of started my online presence by accident. I was doing my first master's in library sciences, and I started posting pictures of books on my Instagram, which had up till then been pictures of, dinner and my cat and whatever.
Instagram is for, right?
You would think. But people like really seized on the book idea. And from there, it's been like this, to me, it seems like a meteoric rise through the popularity scale of social media. I'm coming up on 30,000 followers on Instagram now, which blows my mind.
Wow.
And yeah, so most of my social media presence is posting about book history, and all of the sort of interesting and weird things that come with learning about the book as a physical object. So I have a series of videos called Bite-Sized Book History, where I kind of delve into specific topics ranging from miniature books to four-edge paintings to those funny little guys in the margins of illuminated manuscripts called grotesques.
Yeah. I love marginalia. I literally have, you can't see it, but I have it was a calligraphy. Actually I can just show you. I'm gonna do this. It's probably gonna be the other way around on the screen, but this is.
Oh, I see. Oh, cool. And I see your illuminated thing on your wall back there too.
Yeah, this was from a shitpost calligrapher online.
Oh my God, I love them.
Yeah. I commissioned them specifically. Hopefully that's not going to stay up. I'm going to move it. I can't do it well. Yeah, I went to them, and so yeah, the archives are not neutral sign was very important to me. And then the marginalia bit that I just showed you was one of my favorite articles I ever read about John Adams. Because the American Revolution is my time period of study that I did for my bachelor's. It was just my favorite thing about him because he wrote in the margins of Mary Wollstonecraft's on the rights of women, basically like telling her to like stop what are you doing? Like, maniac, know your limits. It's like talk about politics. It's
amazing. That's
it's
so
my favorite sexist line ever. Like, this man is arguing with a woman who is across the ocean, which
yeah,
I mean,
and it's not like she's going to read that in the
yeah.
margin of his book of hers. Like,
yeah, I love that idea of a conversation happening in the margins of a book. I mean, because as both of us have been college students, university students, we know the value of interrogating the text by writing in the margins as you're going. So sorry, that was a tangent. But
no, that's a really good segue, because like that's really what speaks to me about the kind of book history that I do, which is like really focusing on the physical and the material culture, the material history of the book, because you see so many hands in the book when you start to examine it in that physical way, like from the marginalia of understanding, like even though the person who's writing the marginalia probably knows that the person they are speaking to in the text will never read it, they're still saying it as if they're in that dialogue, like one-on-one. And it's just a really fascinating example of how people thought of reading and how people understood how they were engaging with the text. And even beyond that, in terms of like bookbinding and the making of the paper and evidence of use. I really love what I affectionately call yucky books. Books that have just been used beyond all rational anything. Books that have been repaired and drawn in and just torn up, because it really shows how people treasured books, because there are a lot of repairs in these worn books. And I don't know, it's that human connection across time that really I love about book history.
There's something about like my stepmother a long time ago used to find like she used to go antiquing, and so she would find like old books and things that she thought that I might like. And so it's always kind of this weird thrill when you open an older book and you see like inscriptions written from the previous owners, or like even just things like little dates or just little reminders or anything like that, like the continued history of a printed work. It's such a visceral thing, especially because you can actually touch it. Whereas like, I mean, don't get me wrong, the ubiquity of online resources, and it has been ridiculous and helpful to many people, but there is like, I still struggle with reading stuff online, like things that I would take notes for, or or interrogating. I was doing it the other day. I was reading an article, and all I wanted to do was write in the like on my computer screen practically. Just be like, okay, no, you can't do that. So and maybe it just speaks to like generationally where we might be, or just how we utilize text, I guess. But it's still a struggle for me in my old age. I don't know, I'm almost 40, but I'm getting there.
I know, our elder millennialness.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a rough go when you can't just physically write on the thing anymore. I had a friend in college also who watched me writing in a book one time, and I'm one of those people like who dog ears and breaks the spine, because you have to get like you're pushing it down so you can just and she was just like like she was a bibliophile, but in the sense where it's like they must be pristine and preserved. It's like, then what's the point of buying it?
Right. Yeah. I know, I have one of my books here that has nice little flags. This is not my worst offender in terms of books that I have flagged all to heck. But yeah, there's plenty of underlining. Yeah. I don't take a lot of notes in my margins. I do a lot of underlining. Yeah. And then somehow, I don't know, but yeah.
When I started graduate school, I never knew what wasn't highlightable. So like half the time, like a 40-page article would be mostly highlighters. And one of my professors who was sitting next to me, it was like one of those like Socratic kind of like, let's sit in the round and talk like equals, stuff. He sat next to me that one day, looks down at my article that I had highlighted to death. And he's like, I think you missed a spot. And I was like, oh, yes, thank you. No, I I have a book that's exclusively just about paper over here.
Oh
And
yeah, I think I'm actually using my book about paper as a stand for my laptop.
hey, there we go.
Because that's just how we roll these days.
We're just going to be sharing books and stuff. Is it this one?
I know, right? Yes, actually, well, which one is this? This is Alexander Monroe's book about paper. I don't know where Mike Kurlansky is.
Oh.
It's around.
Well, I didn't know that there was another one about paper, so we're gonna have to do a exchange of. Okay, one more.
Anyway.
One more. Do you have this one?
I don't. I've been wanting that though.
This one, very good. I read it a few years ago, and like, ink is just fascinating to me, and I did a whole preservation paper on Iron Gall ink, basically.
Oh, that's so fun.
Right. This is just for us now. Nobody else cares. But yeah, it was one of those things where I'm like, I am fascinated by Iron Gall ink. Like when I got to see the Declaration of Independence in DC, just looking, I'd be like, oh, we can barely read this anymore because we don't know the recipe.
Yeah.
And that's only something that I appreciate, you appreciate, and that's it. It's just
our funny little niche of ink lovers.
I know. But yeah, no, I can just send this to you if you want.
Oh yeah. I need to buy one for myself.
Sure. Yeah. In the interim, if you want to read that, okay. I'm not editing this, but we'll talk. Like I said, I don't edit.
You know where to find me.
Yeah. Anyway, so what we're here to talk about, for the most part, without the tangents and everything, is the Magic the Gathering cards that you occasionally post online and talk about the history of the book, as well as the relationship between libraries and archives to books and just reading culture. So we're going to experiment a little here with this particular video. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this will work. Hold on. Like I said, I'm not going to edit this. Doodah. Just trying to get the thing going. So we have that. And then we're going to switch over here, and everyone loves some behind the scenes shenanigans. Okay, this should work. Okay. Can you see? Okay, yes. Good. All right, so this is a combination of yours and mine cards that we have found. So I feel like we should do a little bit of what you do online, and we're going to go through some of these cards and talk about them a little bit. First of all, Allie, how much do you know about Magic the Gathering? Like, what's your level of like play history, I guess?
My partner and I play fairly often. We play a format called Draft, and that is a limited format. So it's not the kind of Magic the Gathering where, you know, you can go out to your card shop and buy your specialized super powerful cards.
Yeah.
It's you open individual packets and you play with what comes out of those packets.
Okay.
You kind of build your deck as you go, and it's a cheaper way of playing than, you know, having to go out and buy that Black Lotus or that $10,000 card that would really make your deck super powerful. That format is called Constructed. And there are lots of different sort of ways of playing Constructed, and lots of different sort of sets of cards that you can use for Constructed. Some forms of Constructed you can only play with cards that are so recent. Some forms you can play with like the length of cards from all time. Wizards of the Coast regularly bans cards from certain play types because they're too powerful.
Why did they ban it?
Yeah, I know, right? But so like Black Lotus has been banned from a lot of play types, and Black Lotus is like that legendary card that gets you what's called mana for super, super cheap. And that is a resource that you need to cast other spells and just sort of progress through the game. But Black Lotus came out in one of the earliest sets, and it's like the legendary card, the holy grail of Magic cards. They sell for tens of thousands of dollars. And so, like, you know, you have people in the competitive circuit who have these decks that are worth thousands of dollars,
Mhm.
And then you have the more run-of-the-mill people who play Friday night Magic at their local comic shops or game stores. And that format is usually draft or sealed. So that involves just opening new packets and using the cards out of there.
Which I assume is just a more equalizing kind of, because yeah, like I said, people I've known in the past who play, yeah, there was like a lot that they put into the construction of their decks. Because so my history with Magic is that I have regularly had people in my life try to teach me Magic the Gathering, and I have it's just like gone in one ear and out the other. Like it's not that I don't find that the game is interesting. It is, because I understand certain things like the mana pools that come from like the land masses, and there's tons of amazing artwork that goes with all of these cards. I follow a lot of people who have done Magic artwork. But it's just one of those games that passed me by in like the era of which I grew up, and then it's just kind of like I don't know if I have the brain capacity anymore to keep it all in, but I love that there are other people who can at least talk to me about it and or guide me through what the hell it is we're talking about. So that's why you're here.
Like I mentioned earlier, I would not call myself good at Magic. I am not very clever when it comes to strategy. I'm not really very good at that sort of thing. And my partner, on the other hand, is like this incredible strategist, and but sometimes I beat him. So it just depends.
Yeah.
It also depends on the cards you get from the packages you open, and you might just get really lucky and get like a Planeswalker or a super powerful card. So
it's like a card. It's like card-based improv.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
Like, but I really like cards that steal control of your opponent's monster or creature, and I like cards that have what's called flying. Flyers are pretty powerful card types. That means that your creature can't be hit by cards without flying. So basically, like you have your spider, well, a spider's a bad example. You have your wolf creature, and then there's a bird. And so the wolf can't get the bird because it can't fly. But some creatures have what's called reach. So if you have a spider often has reach if you get a creature card that's a spider. So it can kind of reach up and get that flying creature.
Okay.
So there are a lot of mechanics that are specific to different sets too, that are a bit of a struggle to comprehend for me. But things like flying and reach and like haste and all sorts of just sort of basic effects that have been constant through the whole game are interesting things.
Because it's similar. I mean, the way you're describing it, it's also very similar to like D&D. Where
exactly,
you have like a 5-foot reach to get to the thing, and the flying creature's coming, but oh no, you're on the ground. That kind. So that appeals to that part of my brain. I understand that entirely. So thank you. Is there? So I'm curious. Like, is there kind of like a set layout for how you approach Magic? Like, because I know what I've seen is that people have like their pools of mana over here, and then they like you activate, but you can unactivate a card or something like that.
Yeah. So I think, at least for me, like a lot of the frame of reference before coming into Magic was like a general cultural concept of Yu-Gi-Oh, which is like, I flip over my trap card, and it's like I still have no idea what that means, but I was like, oh, so like, will I be flipping over my trap card in this? Is that how this works? And it's like, not really. But like when you're playing in draft format, you draft 23 cards of a type that is kind of like the one on the screen. So instant, sorcery, enchantment, creature, that sort of thing. And then you go to you usually have either your comic book shop or your game store or whatever has just a stack of land cards that you can choose from. And with your 23 cards, usually the best strategy is to build around 2 colors of mana. You can have as many colors of mana as you want. And you can really have as many cards in your deck as you want, especially in this sort of Friday Night Magic format. There's not a lot of hard set rules usually, depending on where you're playing. But the 2 mana rule, so you want like blue and green, or black and white, or red and blue, or something like that, because a lot of sets will have cards that play really well off of those color combinations, and they have cards sort of built into the set that utilize that color combination. The Ravnica sets are very good about that, because they have what are called guilds, and each of those guilds consists of a different color pair. So that was kind of the set that I first played, so I'm kind of familiar with that concept. But once you draft your deck of 23 or however many, you pick 17 lands. So that would be a split between blue and green, or a few more blue rather than green, because you have more blue cards in your deck. And you know, it's up to you. You don't have to draft the lands, which is good.
Okay. It's like, whew. Especially when you said 17s, like that's the majority of the card.
Yeah, right. There are some sets that
math.
have things like non-basic lands, things like snow lands, where in a deck or in a set with snow lands, you will have creatures or instants or sorceries or whatever that require a snow land to be cast. Usually this is a set with an Arctic theme, or like a Nordic sort of whatever. That it requires that special kind of mana, and for that you do have to draft the snow lands, but usually for most sets it's just land.
Yeah, because there's 5 mana, or is there 6 mana?
5. So there's black, white, green, red, blue.
Okay, in that I know water, fire, earth. Black is death.
Yeah, and white is light.
Yeah, okay. So, okay, basics here. I'm sure that there's nuances to it, but yeah, for our purposes, we're going with some very basic stuff. Okay, so given that we have like a nice little baseline we can kind of go with, let's, so these cards are actually arranged by like alphabetically, so there's no rhyme or reason really. So we're looking here at the Archive Trap, which is a blue card. Do you find the archives, libraries, books kind of stick to a particular mana type at all?
Yes. So a lot of archives, books, library, archivist, scroll card types, they tend to be blue. Blue is kind of the color of knowledge and thought. So it really makes sense that that sort of card concept is tied to blue. An important part of this that I forgot to mention is that when you build a deck and you're going to be playing with that deck is henceforth known as your library. So every time you draw a card, you're drawing a card from your library. And you can see in the text of this card, if an opponent searched his or her library this turn, blah, blah, blah. So that means like there might be a card type that says search your library for a basic land and put it onto the playing field tapped, which means that it's sideways rather than up. When it's sideways, you can't use it.
Okay.
And then like your next turn, everything untaps and becomes usable again.
Gotcha.
Unless there's an effect on it or whatever, but basically. So you, at the heart of magic is this concept of you're a wizard and you know all of this magic, and you're paging through your library to find the best spells to combat your fellow wizard. So books are really at the heart of magic, which I find super interesting, because it's not really like a conscious thing. Like I don't know that people actually think of themselves as powerful wizards combing through their spell books. It's more of a flavor.
Yeah.
But like the whole game is sort of built around that, but it's not often like really explicitly acknowledged, which is interesting.
No, that I mean, and that's really interesting, like you said, because it's like there's this conceptual idea behind Magic the Gathering that says like, oh no, if you really think of it, if you go like macro on it, you are actually all these really powerful mages who are like battling each other for whatever reason. Like, you know, battle royale, maybe you're just having a day like where you're like, let's see who's better than the other one. I don't know.
It stole my parking spot.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a bunch of people who, it's kind of like the old dueling grounds from like American history. It's just like, sir, I demand satisfaction, smack to the mage dueling hill.
Yeah.
Here we go. Maybe with less death, I don't know. But yeah, like that macro scale, like if you zoom out and you're watching like how the game itself is kind of almost wants you to visualize it, but is not banking on that part of it.
Yeah.
Just going like,
yeah, that's part of, I think, what makes Magic so appealing so widely is because you don't have to role play to play Magic. Like, you can. There are plenty of people who, you know, there are lots of personality tests online to sort of tell you what your guild is based on your answers to questions, and then you can always play the is it combination. My combo is it, apparently, according to the personality tests, which is red and blue. It's like the color of I don't want to say genius because that makes me sound really smart, and that is debatable.
My God.
But like the sort of mad scientist type of person, the person who is experimenting and you know, they're just really gung-ho. Because it has the blue of knowledge with the red, which is more fiery, more passionate.
Passion. Yes.
Yeah. So I could, every time I drafted, put together a deck of red and blue cards and be like, yes, I am the mad is it wizard, and I'm coming for you.
Did you just recolor them all purple and just go with that? And
yeah, right.
Can you combine mana colors like a color wheel and be like, all right, here's the contrasting colors and here's
I know, it's actually like this long-standing, like, when will they bring purple mana out? But they have not yet. So
Wizards is holding out, like, especially on the purple card. Like, that's my favorite color. So
yeah, and my favorite is pink. So obviously,
like, maybe I get into Magic more if there were purple cards.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't know. I don't know either, but it's possible.
But back to this specific card,
yes.
You can see sort of up in the right-hand corner, there's a little number and two sort of water droplets. And that is indicative of how much mana you need to spend to cast this card, which is an instant. And it actually is a trap card, which has nothing really to do with the Yu-Gi-Oh reference earlier. But for this card, you would need to spend 3 mana of any color, whatever color, colorless, as well as 2 blue mana. You have to have the 2 blue. Wow. So, you know, that's part of the deck building process of why you might want more blue mana than green mana or whatever when you're building. If you have cards like this where it requires more than one of that specific type, because you want to make sure that you have that type available at any given moment, because you can only play one land a turn.
Okay.
So when it's my turn, I can put out a blue land, and then the opponent can put out a red land, and then it's back to me and I can put out my second blue land. And so for this one, like, if I were just playing one land at a time, I wouldn't be able to play this card until the 5th turn.
Gotcha.
Because I didn't have enough mana to cast it until then.
When you're doing a draft, so do you choose the land after you have opened your draft? Okay, just making sure. To me, it sounds almost like a stupid question, but at the same time, I don't know.
No, there are no stupid questions.
Okay, good. Because I would think that would be really shitty if you open this pack and you've already chosen a bunch of land. You're like, it's all red and I only have green.
I know, and that's part of the fun, the challenge of playing with a limited set of cards like that, because you know, if you really go into it having your heart set on like, gosh, I really want to play black and white today, but the packs you open don't really have any great black and white cards, then you know, you just got to make do with what you have. and then you build your mana pool around that.
Okay, cool. No, I mean that clears some things up, and because because you also have you have your concept of the library, you also have the concept of a graveyard for your cards. So I imagine, this is me just spitballing here, are those just cards that have been destroyed by your opponent, or are like discards, anything like that?
Yeah, so like for example, with Archive Trap here, this is an instant. So it can be cast on your turn or your opponent's turn, as long as you have the mana to cast it. So if an opponent searched his or her library this turn, like I said, for example, if they had a spell that said search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the field tapped, after that they have to shuffle their library.
Oh, okay.
So if they did that, then this spell is free. So yeah, because it's as if they entered the library, and once they're in there, they're trapped. And they actually have to put the top 13 cards of their library that they just shuffled into the graveyard.
Oh no.
So that is sort of colloquially called milling. I forget why. There's like some really specific lore, not even lore, but like gameplay lore reason that I can't remember.
Okay. No
but yeah, so they have to mill 13 cards, and those go into their graveyard. So that means they are no longer part of their library. It is as if they have been cast, and they can't play them anymore unless they have a lot of cards black cards have powers that are like, bring this creature back from your graveyard into your hand or into your library or whatever. But unless you have a special card like that does that, then graveyard they're buried, basically.
They are dead. They are gone. I figure with black or white, I would imagine resurrection is probably a big part of that. You know, when you've got like necromancy on one side.
Yeah.
That seems a bit, and then because there's a lot in these cards to cover, because not only do you have the somewhat of the flavor text, but the artistry that we see here, because one of the things that you do online is essentially go through like, what are they depicting versus what are they talking about. So we have a card entitled Archive Trap. When you're looking at the actual artwork by Jason Felix there down in the corner, does this scream archived to you, or does it seem more library-ish?
Yeah. So this is an interesting issue that you have touched on, and that is true of a lot of sort of fantasy and science fiction depictions of places where old books are. A lot of writers and a lot of artists who don't have a lot of direct experience with archive work or special collections work, they think old stuff goes in archive and books go in library. So it's this like weird artificial dichotomy that kind of makes sense, but it's not true per se. So like this, to me, like this is a library. This is clearly a library. And a lot of the gameplay text can even sometimes use, this card doesn't have it, but when there's flavor text on the bottom, a lot of people use library as a place, not for your deck, but library and archives interchangeably. So they obviously, in the play text of this, if an opponent searched his or her library this turn, like they're searching the library, therefore there should be a library in the card art. However,
but archive.
Like,
okay. I think we're gonna run into that a lot in these cards, especially. So let's move on to the next card. Oh, this is much smaller, so if you can see that, this is one of the earliest ones that I ever came across. And this, I think, based on the art, is also probably one of the earlier cards for Magic. But our lovely archivist here. Impressions? What first impressions?
I'm not cool enough to be able to say like, that's from the beta set. It is from a very early set, and you can kind of tell by the colorful border and just the sort of design. But yeah, it might be an archivist.
I mean, he's
it's
not a
very
book.
stereotypical. In the flavor text contributes to that. Of some do, some teach, the rest look it up.
Yeah.
As though like archivists and librarians are somehow too inept to actually do anything, and that's why they're among the books.
Yeah, we don't really care. I mean, it's just like they're just in our collections. Not like we bother caring about anything we have or whatever. I enjoy the typical portrayal of anyone in archives as being a old white man
with a big mustache and
big. I mean, he's rocking that hair. That's all I'm gonna say, or lack thereof on top.
Or lack thereof.
Yeah. But I mean, I would guess he's heterosexual just because that seems to be the default. God forbid we got to know anybody who was in the archives. So.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because some of the early Magic cards very much play into all sorts of stereotypes. But the more recent sets, like even like, boy, the past 15 years or more, they have made a real point to depict more diversity among their characters and in what their cards represent, which like they have a lot of non-binary characters now, and they have a lot of LGBT couples and people of color doing cool things, and it's not just, you know, a white rainbow of, you know, your stereotypical fantasy whatever. So yeah, it's I'm glad that they sort of clocked that early on, and they're not having to go back and say like, oh well, we didn't realize that this was a problem until a couple years ago, so oopsie,
our bad.
Yeah. And they have banned some cards that have like bad representation on them, or things that are stereotypical or like sort of yucky references. So even if like they play in the game fine, like you can't play with them because they're bad. Yeah, so I really appreciate that, that they're making a conscious effort. And obviously they're not perfect. There's still lots of white faces, many more than faces of color in the development teams and things like that, but they are trying.
Yeah, I appreciate especially artists of color that they've been bringing in, because I think a lot of people have kind of this idea of what your standard fantasy art is kind of supposed to look like. It's either like Tolkien-esque, or it's on the back on the side of your van kind of art.
Like, that epic wizard.
Exactly. Which I'm fine with. I mean, if they did like a whole set that was really just like leaning into that entirely, I'd be absolutely there to just have the artwork. But I do appreciate like a lot more of these artists that they're bringing in who have like a fresher take on what fantasy is. I know that the most recent set that's come out, because I have been paying attention, is more like 1920s based. Very, very Art Deco, but also like magical fantasy, you know, magical urban fantasy kind of stuff, which is entirely my jam. I love urban fantasy. It's so good. So yeah, I appreciate the older work, which the artist is, oh God, I can't even read that.
Pete Ventera, maybe?
Okay, yeah, Pete Ventero. Yeah, we'll go with that. I'm sorry if that isn't your entire name, but Pete, you did a good job for what you had. But you know, like I can appreciate this work, but then also see like the evolution of the card art and how it is becoming more inclusive as it has progressed. So yay. Let's move on. Yes, this one, another archivist.
This
by Donato Giancola. For one, I like so the border is almost matching the painting that they are standing in. It's and the face on this person is interesting. Like, it's like you just caught them walking by you, and they're just like, what are you even doing here?
Like, how dare you perceive me?
You perceive the archivist in I presume your natural environment. In front of a painting. It's interesting. So this is just like I assume this is another early one too.
Yes, yeah. You can tell like the early borders, like that blue border, it's marbled. Like it's very clearly a marbled look. And I think that that's sort of an interesting nod to the bookness at the heart of the game. But this is a creature card. So was the last card, Mr. Mustache Archivist. So this is the kind of card that can attack and block. So you would be able to pay mana and put this on the battlefield and attack with it by tapping it. And tapping means just turning it sideways. Okay. And also that little arrow that's right next to draw a card, that little meep. Yeah. That is the meep, yeah, that little guy. That is the symbol for tap. So you can either tap and attack, and this creature is a 1/1, so it's not terribly strong. It only hits for 1 damage. Or you can tap it and you can tap it and enable yourself to draw a card, which sort of fits in with the archivist theme. Okay. Because you have an archivist, so you can say like, oh, I need this reference book, and they say, oh, okay, I can get that for you.
It's like instant research, just kind of happening. Like this is your reference archivist, and you're just like, I need something on, I want to say green. You got green anywhere? They're like, let me check the back. It's almost a retail environment.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, and I love this little flavor text. Knowledge is a feast for the mind, savor every swallow, which it's an interesting line.
Yeah, I think that sort of plays into the fact that you can either attack or use this ability. You can't do both. Okay. So you really have to make a conscious choice, and I guess like savor whatever choice you make. Like you can either go into the library and get a new card, or you can bonk your opponent for 1.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm looking at this person, and I want to, like, I'm going with a non-binary approach.
I know. I really want them to also be non-binary. I don't know what they're meant to be.
Yeah, but considering like the history, but there is, I don't want to comment on looks, but they have a very non-binary vibe to them. So I'm going with that.
I am appropriating them into the non-binary.
as long as somebody is. I mean, I just appreciate their face. Like, I feel like sometimes that's the face I used to make. Sometimes. Yeah. Or it's just kind of like, what? Why?
What do you mean you need more books? I have all of these books.
Yeah, they're already harried. Like it's like, I have all of this. I have 7 scrolls at the least. And you want something.
And I don't have a card.
Exactly. And I couldn't find the green thing you were looking for. I'm sorry.
I'm going to need you to fill out a poll slip.
Yeah. It's like, could you put your coffee and your pencil down over there? None of that in here. Thank you. Again, I love that they're just by a painting. It's just, it's just so beautiful.
I know, it's really pretty. I feel like this was just an excuse for the artist to draw a nice painting. Like, yeah, fair enough.
I saw a lot of those landscapes, and I just wanted to do my or they were staring wistfully at the painting before they turned to the camera, essentially. And they're like, you're interrupting the 1 minute of downtime I have. I'm gonna ask, so there's a 7 in the corner over here. Yes. You know it. What does that mean?
That is the set. So I don't know that has anything to do with the number 7, or if it's just like the Led Zeppelin Zoso, like that doesn't mean anything. But it looks like something. You can say it, but it's not a word. Okay. So I'm not sure what set this is from, but that is the set symbol. And on every card, there'll be like a little thingy there. So for like some sets, there's even like a little open book, or like an owl or something like that. And each set has a different little dealie.
Cool. Well, good to know. I also just like the idea that the archivist is a creature, but also a wizard. It's like because it appeals to a friend of mine, and I were talking a little bit about TTRPGs, and she and I both have, I think, made wizard characters that are supposed to function as archivists, just for funs, shits and giggles, because trying to build an archivist character is a little hard considering backgrounds and feats and everything, but not impossible. So
just with enough dedication.
Yeah, like if you have enough homebrew content, you too can play an archivist. Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, this is one you sent me.
Yeah. So this is one that I have done a magic thread on. And if you want to go back through those hashtags, it is hashtag MTG Bookhist, BOOKHIST. And so in those threads, I kind of feature a single card or a pair of cards and do a deep dive on what exactly is happening here. So this is from the Strixhaven set, whose little symbol is an owl. You can see in that same place where the 7 was before. And this is a spell that the flavor is there are these horrible mage hunter creatures who are menacing this magic college. Oh, no. And this one has made it into the Biblioplex, which is like this sort of impossible library. And it was chasing a mage, but the mage cast a spell and it made all of the books sort of go on top of the mage hunter, so the mage could get away. And you can see, you know, like they're sort of clinging to it. There's scrolls wrapped around his little legs.
Yeah.
So they're really doing their job. And this is another instance. So this is one of those that can be played on your turn or your opponent's turn. So say your opponent is attacking you with a creature, and you say, haha, no, I will bury you in books. And this costs 2 less mana to cast if it's targeting an attacking creature. So it has that sort of, it encourages you to use it like that. And it literally buries that creature in books. It puts the target creature into its owner's library second from the top. So it puts cards on top of it back into the owner's deck.
That's
so
cool.
Eventually they'll draw it again, and eventually they'll be able to pay the mana and recast it. But you don't have to deal with it anymore.
Yeah. It's just putting it off until later when you could maybe do something else to stop it or destroy it. I do appreciate the guy in the back running away. It's like, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god. There's a very are you familiar with the anime Read or Die? Yes.
Oh my god, that's one of my favorites.
It's so good. It has
with like the Yumiko who can control paper.
Agent Paper, and like it kind of brings to mind that idea of her being able to just take, like, she's the paper and make weaponry and all kinds of stuff. Oh man, I haven't thought about that in ages.
I love that anime. That's one of my all-time favorites.
It's so good.
Just because of the book thing.
I
don't remember a whole lot of the plot, but I was like, this is the coolest superpower ever.
Right. In making my archivist character in D&D Beyond, I was trying to be like, okay, how can I make an Agent Paper? How can I give her the power of paper? So yeah, this is kind of giving me that vibe.
And the flavor text refers to that too, that there are no weapons allowed in the Biblioplex, but a clever mage is never truly defenseless.
Very true. I mean, knowledge is power, quite frankly. So
I also I personally kind of like the sort of, I don't know if it's a conscious nod to the fact that you can't bring in pens or bottled water or bags or whatever into the reading room. But I like that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, like when you're in a college library nowadays, no one cares. Those books have been beaten up to their, no one can barely recognize them anymore. But I would imagine in a school of, magic books, there might be a few more restrictions. A little bit. I don't know. I mean, maybe they have some fairly lax, daytime workers, like some students that work there where there's like, whatever. Well, that's really cool. And I do love this art. Like Zoltan Boros, very good. The creature itself is just really rad looking. and it's just so friend shaped, and we should make friends with it.
I know, we should make friends with the mage hunter killer, whatever the heck they're called. Like, we should make them mage friends.
Yeah, mage friends. I mean, there's always going to be that one. It's like, oh, they're not like the other mage hunters. Maybe we can be friends, and they'll defend us at the right moment in this Disney movie we are constructing. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. Oh yeah.
Oh, Cody.
This one, did you send me this one?
Yes.
Or did I? Okay, yeah. I just love that it's called Cody. The Vociferous Codex.
So Cody is really what launched me on this sort of path of inquiry of Magic the Gathering and book history. Mm-hmm. He came out in the Strixhaven set, which, like, there was a big sort of book element to that set because it was taking place in a magical college.
Yeah.
And so, like, they were doing previews of cards and releasing things little by little, and I was like, oh my god, there's so much book content, this is so exciting. And then they released Cody, and I don't know, something about it just like really spoke to me of like, why is he called Cody? What's going on with that eye? What is that meant to represent? Like, is that a nose that's also a clasp? And he's mobile? And like, what is this stand? And like, it was all of the things that I was interested in with hand press books and like furniture and sort of the concept of a book to someone who isn't necessarily a book specialist sort of all came together with Cody. And I was like, I could write such a long paper on this.
The true sign of an academic. How can I write a paper?
And so, like, yeah, that's sort of what kicked everything off. I think if you go far enough back in my Twitter, you can see me just hollering about Cody when he was first released. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. And he sort of became like this mascot for the set, actually. In the promos that Wizards of the Coast put out for the set, he sort of acts as this like MC, and he's introducing all of the wizard dorms, basically. Oh, cool. And saying like, if you are good with words, you might fit well in this dorm, or, you know, if you like to dance, you'll probably be in this dorm. And but he has this like wild New York accent.
Oh, really?
It's hilarious. And he sort of talks with his foredge. And I love the way that was animated and interpreted. I spoke to Daniel Lundgren about sort of his design for Cody and what he looked at and his inspirations. And that was very valuable and very interesting. And it sort of showed me this, it's like this game of telephone. Where you have, you know, an old hand press book with metal furniture, you know, metal corners and a boss in the center that protects the binding from overuse, from being bumped. And then you take an artistic eye to that and you get Cody, who has some of those pieces reinterpreted into an animated book.
Yeah.
You can see, you know, that central boss is an eyeball.
Yeah.
And he has an eyebrow, and I talked to Daniel Lundgren about that, and he was like, yeah, it's just kind of an eyebrow. I love that is there and it fits, but it doesn't like have a purpose that's based on anything, but it looks good, so like here we are.
Yeah.
And then
take some artistic interpretation somewhere.
Yeah, and then the little clasp that's like that trefoil that functions as a nose. It's so cool. But then, yeah, but when they interpreted him to be the mascot of the set, they sort of took away a lot of those little things and reinterpreted him to move. And I thought that was really interesting. Like the little swirlies on either side of his eye are gone. And they really sort of simplified him to focus on characterization and movement. And so you get from, you know, this original hand pressed book to this simplified, moving, talking character from New York. And it's just like, it's really an interesting path of what happened there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think especially like when you're trying to switch over to a different medium that is still art based, but yeah, like you're saying, you're trying to simplify to I don't know if it's just make room for the characterization, especially like given what you want him to do. Like I don't, how much of those details do you think would have been noticeable, or I mean, was his movement any different where you're like, no, they could have still kept the trefoil in there? And
No, I mean, it was kind of a simplistic animation. It was flatter.
Gotcha.
It wasn't, like super detailed. It was more humorous
Gotcha.
that they were focusing on. But then there is another adaptation in the Magic the Gathering Arena game, which is the online version of Magic. So within that game, you can have pets. So they're like little dragons and little cats that are made of fire and whatever. They serve no purpose other than to just be there and look cute and encourage you if you're winning and sort of go, oh no, if you're losing.
Of course.
But there's a Cody pet.
What?
Yeah, so he doesn't say anything in that, but he is animated. And they retained a lot more of his biblicological detail in that. And obviously we're something that I kind of skipped over in my haste to like dive into Cody.
Sure.
Is Cody comes from Codex.
Yeah.
And that's why they named him that. And it's just like, oh, I love this so much.
Yeah, no, I mean, I might have to just play Magic Arena to have a book pet. Because I'm just that simple and it's that easy for me.
I took video of him and I put it in, I've written a blog post about sort of the nature of books in Magic the Gathering, and I included a few videos, one of which is animated Cody, and then there are two of Arena Pet Cody. So you can sort of see how he like interacts with his stand. The stand is like his little legs, basically.
Yeah.
But if you lose, he falls out of his stand.
No.
And it's like it's kind of tragic, but it's like, how do you animate a book to imply that you're losing? Like, it's a fascinating sort of like I would love to speak to the animator to figure out how they settled on that particular animation to signify loss rather than like opening up and just like bleh, or the whole stand falling over, or there are lots of different ways to signify an oopsie with a book.
Or could it like open up and it's just a sad face inside.
Yeah. Or like all the pictures fall out or something.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do an older reference. The Care Bears, was it the magician kid, Nicholas with the book, the evil book with the face sticking out of it? Like maybe something like that with Cody, where it's just like there's just a face, it's just a head sticking out. Again, I'm old, everyone. Just saying. Yeah, oh my god, she's just adorable looking.
I know. I fixate so much on like the image and the concept of Cody that I often forget about his effects, mostly because like I would never play him in draft. He is not good for draft. He is good for constructed.
Okay.
So you can't cast permanent spells. That sucks.
That sounds like something that would suck.
Yeah, permanent spells are things like creatures, the things that attack and block, or enchantments, the things that like give additional power.
Right.
Things that stay on the battlefield, basically, those are permanents. But there are some constructed decks that really, they do not focus on that kind of card. They really go all in on spells and instants, sorceries and instants, and things like that. Things that show up, do what they do, and then go. They either go to the graveyard or into exile or whatever. So Cody is really built for that kind of deck. And his power is if you pay 4 mana and tap him, you can add 5 mana of every color. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
But it's got like this whole wall of text. When you cast your next spell this turn, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile an instant or sorcery card with lesser mana value.
Oh Lord.
Until end of turn, you may cast that card without paying for it. Put each other card exiled this way onto the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's very library focused. This is one of those cards that I also wouldn't play with because it's very complicated and I don't think that I could understand it very well.
Like a word problem. I hate word problems, and it's just kind of like, oh my God.
Yeah. So like, yeah. It's book focused, it's library focused. It's basically saying like, if you have Cody, this special book, he allows you to use your magic better. And so you can cast spells better.
Especially if you're going for like a really like, I guess, strike heavy kind of, you know, it's like, okay, one and done, one and done, one and done. You know, this, I could understand this being very useful, especially if you get, you know, 5 mana of each. Or 5 of each mana, which if you have an instant and you can just be like, okay, bam, 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 bam.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, yeah.
The only thing is like you have to have 4 mana to even be able to get that 5 mana. So like there are all sorts of cards that are just mind-boggling to me. I don't like playing this way.
Yeah.
You know, these sorceries and these like trick cards and things like that where you know, on your first turn you can put down 1 mana and all of a sudden like the whole world blows up because you have all of these whack-ass cards that really capitalize on that. But like Cody is for a deck like that.
Yeah. Cody's like a finisher.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's like end game, kind of like, all right, I'm ready to go. I've got like 3 or 4 of them lined up that I know I can use, and or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, the way you're talking about that, it sounds like there's a lot of economy of mana, and then there's also a lot of mathematics involved, where I'm just like, there's a reason I didn't study math after high school.
Yep. Yeah, just give me a creature that can attack and block. Like I'm a simple man, just, you know.
Like, allow me to use simple creatures and spells. That's all I ask of you. Well, cool. We'll move on to the next one. Yes. The Cogwork Archivist.
Good old Cogwork Archivist. This is another one that I've spoken about in a Twitter thread, and I sort of compared it with Cog Work Librarian.
Which is the one that's going to follow up this one.
Yeah, so a sort of meta rule of Wizards of the Coast is you can't have a card with you can't have 2 different cards with the same name. So once they created Cogwork Archivist, a creature with reach and pay 2 and tap and put target creature from your graveyard onto the bottom of the owner's library, blah, blah, blah. That effect is set in stone, associated with the name Cogwork Archivist, and that is how it is forever.
Okay.
So they cannot later release a card called Cogwork Archivist that like has flying and allows you to fetch a land from your library. Like that does not work. You cannot do that. And it's just to sort of keep cards organized within the vast library of Magic cards that exist now. There are thousands and thousands, thousands of cards, and they just want to make sure that everything is straight. They do reissue cards sometimes in new sets. Sometimes they give them new card art, but it'll still be Cogwork Archivist with reach and that effect and blah, blah, blah.
Gotcha.
So yeah, once they release a card, that's it. That's the card.
I mean, I can respect that mentality where it's just, it simplifies things, because obviously working in libraries and archives, you often find duplication. And sometimes it's a variation on one. And so you have to like spend a lot of time figuring out, okay, what's the most recent thing, or, you know, I can appreciate that. It makes a lot of sense that you'd want to just make sure it's all like, you know, streamlined and researchable or whatever, especially if do they have an archivist for Magic the Gathering that, like,
I don't know, like I feel like they must, because there's so much art and so much development material and so much stuff. There must be an archivist at Wizards of the Coast, because Wizards also does like D&D. So there are gazillions of pages of development material, I'm sure, that are in an archive somewhere.
If there isn't, then hit me up. I don't know.
I know, right? Yeah.
It's like Allie and I will just like show up like, I think Wizards is actually operates out of my hometown of Renton, Washington as well.
Oh, I knew
So
they were out west somewhere.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely, like, if not in the Seattle area, I think in Renton, which we don't pronounce the T in it. So, but yeah, no, this, first of all, I love this archivist that they have depicted. I love it. It's just, there is something sometimes in the depiction of archivists that can be very alien, that on some level is annoying, because it's just like, oh, okay, well, we're just, we're just so unknowable, and
Yeah, it's like this othering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then there's like something like this where I'm just like, no, that's pretty cool looking. I like that.
Yeah, I'll be identified with that. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, as long as I get to be badass and ride on some wheels like that, like, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
I would hope that creature doesn't want people like climbing on top of it to get to a shelf.
Please do not climb the archivist.
Just like right off to the side of that card is that sign. Like, please. And they had to put it up because somebody did it one time. And now they got to tell people not to do it. But yeah, so this one, the flavor text is, it's the largest library in the multiverse. Of course, it has the largest librarians. Once again, getting into the librarian archivist mix up. Because yeah, based on what this, quote unquote archivist is doing, it's a bit more librarian-esque in their reshelving a book. I think that's a book. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a book.
Yeah. So, I mean, not that archivists don't reshelve. It's just more stuff that you kind of see more happening in the back, where the general public isn't. So unless these two gentlemen, or not gentlemen, these two people walking up are also archivists or in the back of the multiverses library.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have once again that mix up, or the synonymizing, I guess, of librarians and archives, and which, granted, and I've said this on the show and in my articles many times, the overlap between the two professions is there. I mean, there's obviously a Venn diagram, as well as with curators and whatnot. But it's just like, when you get into like the idea of pop culture representations of these professions, the more those mix-ups are portrayed or like just given that kind of attention, the more people don't really recognize the difference. And then there's just less people who understand what it is you do and have a higher demand of things that you are not maybe necessarily ready to do, like perform tasks and whatnot. So just a word to the wise out there. Please don't assume your archivist is a librarian and vice versa.
I dated a guy years ago when I was still working in special collections libraries. I'm a rare book cataloger for a book dealer now. But when I was a special collections librarian, like, he would constantly call me an archivist. And I was like, no, I'm a special collections librarian. And like, I would talk to him about it and explain what I do and explain what an archivist is and how those two things are similar but different. But he would still sort of default to calling me an archivist. And like, obviously we broke up. It wasn't because of that. Like,
no, it was because of that.
And he actually started dating one of my friends who is another special collections librarian. He has since figured it out.
Good.
So
good for him.
But yeah, I thought that was fascinating that like someone who I was pretty darn close with for a long period of time, like that still didn't quite click for them. So that's sort of how pervasive this confusion is between what an archivist is and what a librarian is. I think I noted before that a lot of people think archivist deals with old stuff, librarians deal with books. And that there is somehow a difference there, and there's not.
Yeah.
Like, there can be old books that aren't in an archive, and there can be archival things that aren't in an archive but are in a library, and it's just like there's so much crossover, but they are two distinct fields with distinct practitioners.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this a lot too, where the prevailing, the most dominant piece of media that follows me wherever I go is Indiana Jones. And it's so wild to me that like, especially with Raiders, because that's where everyone gets it from in that last scene. Like, it is wild to me that a 40-year-old piece of media is the only reference anyone has for an archive that isn't an archive, and that Indiana Jones isn't even an archivist. He's a terrible archaeologist, first of all. Don't get me wrong, I love those movies. They are a part of my part of my childhood. Harrison Ford, yeah. But at the same time, it's like it dogs my profession to this day. In my previous work, I would just say like, oh, I'm an archivist, and be like, oh, Indiana Jones? Like, no. Not at all, actually. It turns out one shot of a giant warehouse does not an archives make. But I can see where you would be confused. Allow me to tell you otherwise. But yeah, so it's very interesting how I think the profession spend a lot of time. I mean, librarians, I know that have their own issues in terms of like public perception and everything. But I feel like there's also a lot of time that gets spent on correcting people and not trying to sound like an asshole about it, but at the same time being really like somewhat beleaguered by this idea that you have to constantly explain what you do and who you are all the time.
And that can be like, it can be a really great teaching moment if like at least they have some frame of reference, so you can say like, yeah, archives are kind of stored in this way, and sometimes it does feel like they go on forever, but like every time you have to dedicate some sort of like emotional or verbal labor to describing what the hell it is you do, that, you know, it's understandable that people don't want to do that all the time. You know, you can't always be a teacher. So it can be frustrating, but yeah, it's a blessing and a curse.
It's in the truest sense.
This series blooms.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and now you all know what we have to go through, and hopefully you'll treat your local archivist and your local librarian a lot better than we were treated. And speaking of which, the Cog Work Librarian.
Yes. So here is our Cog Work Librarian, who stole the name from our previous friend who we just saw. Cog Work Librarian came from an earlier set.
Yes, 2014 down here.
Yeah. So they were created long before probably Strixhaven was a twinkle in Mark Rosewater's eye. Mark Rosewater is like the lead designer for Magic the Gathering.
Gotcha.
But so here's Cogwork Librarian, and now that there's a Cogwork Librarian, you can't have another one. So what's a librarian like? Oh, it's the same thing as an archivist, right? And there you go. Yeah. So our friendly little Cogwork Librarian is another one that deals with your library. And this has a really interesting effect that is sort of built for a draft format. So when you pull Cogwork Librarian out of the pack that you open, you say, oh, I have Cogwork Librarian, because normally you're supposed to keep it secret, so nobody knows what creatures and spells and stuff that you have in your library, so you can surprise them with like a big heavy hitter that they didn't know you had, so they can't counter it. But with Cogwork Librarian, you draft it face up. You say, I have Cogwork Librarian. And thereafter, you can draft an additional card from the booster pack. So Cogwork Librarian gets you another card. But then you have to put Cogwork Librarian back into the booster pack, so somebody else will draft him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it really works better with on a Friday Night Magic type draft where you're playing with more than one other person. So at Friday Night Magic drafts, you usually have like a sort of ring of people, like 4 or 5 different people, and everybody opens a pack at one time, and they sort of go through the cards that were in that pack, and they pick a card that they want to put in their deck. And normally you put that face down and you pass that pack to the next person, and you get a new pack from which the person before you has already picked usually the best card from.
Okay.
You go through and you say like, oh, okay, well, I just drafted this card, Vexing Gull, which is my favorite card. It's a seagull card that you can play for like really cheap, and it's an annoying card that I love very much.
It already sounds like my favorite card.
Yeah. So I've drafted Vexing Gull. What do I have that would play well with a blue flyer? And you kind of think like, okay, well, blue-white is a common combination. Maybe I'll pick this white card, and I'll try to pick blue and white cards from the next packs that come around. And it goes on from there.
Gotcha.
But with Cog Work Librarian, you show everybody, aha, I have Cog Work Librarian. And then you can pick another card from that pack.
Oh, okay.
And then when you pass it on, the next person has Cog Work Librarian, and they can draft another card.
And is everybody at the same time just being like, ooh, I have Cog?
Yeah.
I love that if everyone's just announcing it and like slamming it down.
Yeah. Bam, Cog Work Librarian.
What's up? It's like you slam like the doors open, you're like walking into the library like, boom, I've got a librarian.
But Cog Work Librarian is also a creature. And it's not a bad creature. It's a 3/3 for 4 mana. And so like whoever ends up with Cog Work Librarian, like they also have a pretty good creature. This is what's called a colorless card. So you see the little number up in the right corner where you've seen like little water droplets or little like leaves or fire or whatever. It's just the number 4. So that means you can spend whatever color of mana you want to cast this.
Okay.
I really like colorless cards. There are quite a few. Usually they are sort of Cogwork construct creatures that are colorless. I don't know if it's like a non-binary thing that I'm so drawn to the colorless cards, but
there's something to be said for it being kind of like that. There's a stereotype of like neutrality.
Yeah.
Where like this librarian in particular, because it has no particular allegiance, is like a neutral party.
Yeah. It's just a little guy who picks up books.
with a strangely like I love like the scroll sticking out of its back. And then because there's something also very menacing about it, it has a very
it's very sharp. Like there's a lot of corners and points.
It has a very like alien look to it, like Alien's alien kind of xenomorph look to it.
Yeah,
which is intriguing and also frightening. So I don't know what's going on in that library, but maybe don't go there at night.
Right, yeah.
Seems like you might get in trouble. But still, it's like a really cool design. And also with like the little sidecar thing, holding all the books in it. That's really cool. Yeah. Good job, Dan Scott. And I also like the why wait for answers bits. Like, have you ever been to a library or an archives? Like you have to wait for the answers. They don't just come to you. Okay, we'll move on to Folio of Fancies.
So this is, that concept of like books set you free, or reading Rainbow or something, of like the flying book. And this is really interesting. I kind of went into a deep dive on this. I wanted to use it in a talk that I gave a while back, but I could not find the references the artist used for the illuminations in his manuscript. And so eventually, after a lot of banging my face into Google image search, I found them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, especially that the one with that, it looks like a lighthouse and sort of rays of light coming out.
This one here?
No, it's like the one on the left under the snake. It's kind of
this one. Yeah.
And that is actually a Leonardo da Vinci drawing. And it's really interesting in talking to some of the card artists that I got to speak to. I was really curious about their inspiration, sort of where they were drawing this imagery from, if they had a mental concept of a book that they wanted to put on paper, or if they were looking up image references, or if they were using library resources or digitized books or anything like that. And I'd say by far the artists just Google stuff and find what comes up on Google image search, which, you know, it's whatever.
It's a valid form of, yeah.
So like if you Google, I think like fantasy tome or something, you find like, you know, your platonic ideal of a fantasy book with like a big central gem on it and lots of metal and whatever.
I just want a book now that's just called The Platonic Ideal.
Yeah. But you know, the artist for this, Colin Boyer, mentioned that he had pulled up just this Da Vinci sketch which dealt with like the casting of shadow from light. And I was like, do you remember where you got that? And he was like, I don't know, I just found it on Google. And I was like, okay, should be easy enough to sort of backtrack. And good God.
Not so much.
Yeah. So those image licensing sites, such as Getty Images, or there are millions of them who just sort of poach scanned images from digitized books or from social media or whatever, and they throw it up with no metadata and then make you pay like $100 if you want to use it in your magazine article, or $500.
Right.
And this image came from one of those. That was like the image that would always come up, and I couldn't reverse image search it because it had watermarks on it, and it was just like, oh my God. So like I just banged my face into Google Images and Internet Archive. And I eventually found it. It is actually a sketch from one of Da Vinci's manuscript codices, but as reproduced in a book from the 1900s. So this isn't even the Da Vinci sketch. It's a reproduction of the Da Vinci sketch reproduced in a magic card. And it's just
a
like
copy of a copy of a copy.
It's so wild. And like, I mean, obviously for the artist, it's like, it is a drawing by Da Vinci. It works aesthetically. It's cool. There you go. Right. But for like weirdo academics like you and me, it's like, it's so recursive and amazing. Oh my God, I can't believe what this says about the economy of image information and but yeah, it's really cool.
It's, I mean, I think there was as the recording of this, there was a tweet going around about like, it was showing like academia in a nutshell, and it was like, buy the article for $8.99 or get a subscription to the journal for $199.99. And it's just like, yep, that's what it is. And I mean, maybe you're a student and have a discount, maybe. But
your college subscribes to that journal, but
maybe. Like, good luck if you're not in college anymore. Like, because you're made of money, right? Like,
yeah, right. Yeah, academics get in it for the money.
Oh yeah, totally. I got into archives because I really like the idea of debt.
Yeah.
Late stage capitalism.
But folio fancies.
Folio fancies.
Yeah, it's a fun card. Players have no maximum hand size. So this is an artifact. It's not a creature, it's not a spell, it's just like a thing that you have on the battlefield, and it does a thing. So it's sort of passive effect, like while it's out on the battlefield, you can have as many cards in your hand as you can. So when you start a game of Magic, you draw 7 cards. And so each player has 7 cards in their hand, and every turn you draw another card, unless you have a card like this, which you pay X mana and tap this card, and each player draws X cards. So for the person who controls Folio of Fancies, well, no, this is players, so everybody has no maximum hand size.
Yeah.
So let's see, each opponent puts a number of cards equal to the number of cards in their hand from the top of their library into the graveyard. So the sort of trick here is to make your opponent draw as many cards as possible, and then you make them mill that many into their graveyard so they can't play them. So if you have like a 13 hand, then they have to mill 13, and one of the rules of Magic is when it becomes your turn and you can no longer draw a card from your library, you lose the game. So you can mill somebody out. and win the game that way.
That's nasty.
People hate it. People really hate being milled out. Like, that is one of the least fun ways to lose a Magic game.
Yeah, that sounds really mean.
Yeah, but it is a way, and this card sort of facilitates that.
Yeah, it seems like because, I mean, initially before you really get down to that last part, it seems almost like, well, you're giving a lot of benefits to your opponent as well. But then when you look at, when you take into account milling, and you're like, oh no, this could be a real end game scenario. Yeah, this is a mean one. This book does not like you, and it doesn't care about your backstory. But it is cool looking with the
I love that it has wings.
Yeah, it's like, I love the blue and white motif is very very again, illuminated manuscript, very biblical, kind of the Virgin Mary kind of coloring.
Yeah.
So especially with those the gold accentuating halos almost in the background. So very, very cool looking. Yeah, and then just also speaking to your journey to find imagery. I'm actually curious, when you talked to Colin Boyer, how long had it been since he had actually submitted the artwork? What's the time frame on that kind of stuff?
I can't remember which set this is. Well, this is 2019, so not that long ago. Obviously, they do submit the artwork quite a bit before the set actually comes out, to account for corrections and anything like that. So he would have drawn this probably back in 2018, maybe. And I was speaking to him in late 2020, early 2021.
Okay.
So he didn't have a lot of specific memories of this book, which is why I wasn't able to track down that image immediately, because he was like, I just remembered that I searched for this and this came up.
Yeah. This is a warning to artists. Cite your sources.
It's hard to I wish that all artists for Magic cards would cite their sources. That would be cool as hell, but where would that go?
Well, okay, so we'll talk a little bit archives, metadata, and if you're building a database, which if I was building a database of Magic cards, let's just say, throwing it out there, Magic the Gathering, are you listening? You'd basically have the card, the artwork separate of it, but still within the same, project, record folder, however you want to arrange it. The flavor text, you have all of your fields, title, type, artifact or whatever. And then, if you're going to go that granular, which at this point we are, you just you ask the artist as you're going along, if you've used any reference material or whatever, please send that to us, and then we can include it in our database, so that when people like Allie are looking for that, there's a ready and searchable database for academics to make those references and to maybe follow those links, because that's how research works, everybody.
Yeah.
The citations are there for a reason.
I think that I'm kind of struggling against the fact that there has been very little of this type of academic research into Magic the Gathering. There have been analyses of play types and sort of how the game works to immerse the players in the fantasy realm and that sort of thing, but there hasn't been a lot of this sort of bordering on digital humanities type of stuff of making a spreadsheet, analyzing it within that, searching the database, because there are databases of Magic cards, but they are focused on the players. So they are for the players who they want to build a constructed deck and they want to have folio of fancies in there.
Yeah.
So it shows where can you buy this? When was it issued? Are there any different versions? Has it been banned?
So those would be helpful in the database that I'm building too. Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting that and again, because the artists are not really directly involved in the sort of structure of the card or what the text is going to say. They get sort of briefed on what this card does and its role in the story.
Right.
But they don't, they don't say, oh, well, wouldn't it be cool if this actually did this? So there is that sort of division of labor, which makes it hard sometimes to join the art and the text. They're very good at it for the most part. But for example, like that Cogwork Archivist, where the flavor text said about big librarians, and the part is referencing what it's calling an archivist, like there is some disconnect.
And it's always interesting also to see, like, because you have this finished work, like, what was the first sketch? Like, what did it start off as? Like, what's the evolution of the card art? I mean, you always get like you'll get a reissue where the art is different, but it's just like, when you have that initial first card, it's like, so here's your end work, but what were the notes on the first draft of it or whatever? Like, that's, I mean, even with the flavor text too, that would be interesting to know. It's just like, you can, I mean, because going into playing a game like this, there's so much nuance you have to take into account for mechanics and everything. So you have to be on your game to, quote unquote, to do this. But at the same time, it's like the drafts of the text on the cards would almost be interesting to, like, okay, so you said it this way now, but what was it before? Like, how OP was this card when you initially made it?
I know we're running a little long, but if you want to skip to Tome of the Guild Pact, I think that is a great illustration of the kind of thing that we're talking about. Oh, that's a silver border. The silver border cards are in sort of humorous sets.
Oh, I just love it as someone who worked as an editor. I just wanted to throw that one in there, but I also just love the Bob Cratchit type looking at the. Whoops. Oh, okay. This is alphabetical, so.
Poor overwhelmed archivist. I'll
probably have to put up. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's at the end. So
it was one before.
This one.
There we go. Yes. Okay, so this is Tome of the Guild Pact. And I spoke to Randy Gallegos about this card and sort of his process, and he gave me a lot of information, which I really appreciated.
Oh, that's
including the pitch that he got from Wizards. So yeah, I know, it's really cool. Let me pull it up real quick. The pitch was each artist gets like a lore guide and a pitch for what they're drawing and sort of how it fits into everything. And in this case, they got a note about the color, which is colorless. And then the request was, show us a large ornate book bound in leather and metal. The book is shut and might even be locked. We're looking at its cover, which bears a symbol featuring all 10 guild symbols. Something like the one seen on, and then they have a reference to the style guide in there. We've seen this seal a number of times now, so feel free to deviate from the design and or make it relatively subtle, maybe embossed. Do keep the guilds in the same order, please. And then they have the focus, which is the book, and the mood, which is within these pages is the soul of Ravnica. So they are really trying to set the importance of this artifact,
right?
Which it's a rarer card. It has that little like sparkly medallion thing at the bottom, which indicates that it's a rarer card.
This thing down here?
Yeah, that little guy.
Okay.
And so they really wanted to emphasize the importance of this book to sort of the plot. This is a book that plays into the storyline of Ravnica, which was like this big catastrophic event that really brought together like all the heroes and the big bad, and it was drug out over several sets that were all set in Ravnica.
Right.
And like the main character of Magic the Gathering, which there really isn't one per se, but there's the guy who sort of appears most often, which is Jace Beleren.
I think there's a card in here that's like Jace's Archivist or something like
exactly.
that.
Yeah. So as part of this long story, he becomes what's called the Living Guild Pact on Ravnica, even though he doesn't want to be. And the Living Guild Pact is like imbued with all of the power of Ravnica and basically speaks for all of these guilds who don't always get along.
Right.
And Jace is a planeswalker, and he is from a plane that is not Ravnica. He is from elsewhere. And he does not particularly want to spend a whole lot of time on Ravnica. But as the Guild Pact, he has like all of these responsibilities. And Jace's Archivist is an important sort of character in this milieu of what's going on with that storyline, because they kind of pick up Jace's slack and take care of everything and make sure that everything is going in the right place and all the paperwork is filed.
So the most important person in the story, really.
Right? Yeah. And so Jace like eventually comes back and he realizes that his powers don't work because he was gone too long, and it's a whole thing. But the Tome of the Guild Pact is really the symbol of that power. And so they really wanted it to be this important book. You can see that at the top of the book, it's very subtle in this one, but there is a chain. And what
right here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I love about this is that it has like, you can tell that Randy Gallegos either referenced an image or a real chained book, because that connecting mechanism and the shapes of the chain links, like that looks like a chained book. That's not like some artistic rendition of what a book chain might look like. It's like, no, this is a chained book. Like, this is what they look like. And, you know, some chain books do have that chain fitting on the top rather than on the foredge. So like all of this, it all tracks. And in the exposed spine, you can actually see the gatherings of the pages as layered, and like the structure of the binding. And sort of as the spine material is coming away, and it's like, you know what a book is. This is so good. Like
you understood the assignment.
Yeah, he's really considered the form of a book inside and out. In a way that some fantasy artists don't. I think for the most part, a lot of the modern Magic the Gathering artists are really conscientious of the objects they use, that they really try to make them look like real things in space rather than just ideas of things.
And this one in particular, because I mean, just by not only having the chain kind of subtly there, but also in exposing the spine, it tells you a story.
Exactly.
It's like, this has been used. Yeah,
and I love the inclusion of the hand too, because that really it lets the viewer sort of see themselves within this setting, and gives a sense of scale to the book. Because this isn't like a little paperback. This is a larger, weightier tome that really has some heft and importance to it. Cool. I know, and Randy Gallegos said that in drawing this, especially with that little bit of damage, he actually referenced an old book that his wife had. I think it was from the 19th century or something. And he said that he specifically looked at that to figure out, you know, the structure and what a book looks like inside, because he wanted to show that use and that age that comes with the use. And yeah, I love this card, and I think it's really a great example of so much of what we talked about today in the representation of books in Magic cards.
Yeah, I especially love because it's almost like a Cogwork symbol in the middle, but it's also the chaos symbol as well. So it's just like, it's subtle, but I like it.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, we are over time what we were kind of like shaping up to do. So, I mean, I kind of let these things go away for me anyway. So it's never a big deal if we go over, but I think this is probably a good place to wrap it up. We didn't get to every card, but I think when this episode goes out, I'll post up all those cards just so that people, you know, saw what we were initially going to be talking about all the time. And I'll stop sharing here so we can both be present for the ending. Allie, thank you so much for coming on this show.
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out. I don't know why, like, I have read your blog a lot, and but like I never thought to follow you on Twitter for some reason. And so when you reached out, I was like, oh my gosh, she's on Twitter. So like, yay.
I've been here the whole time. No, I mean, it was when I started putting my lists together and being like, who do I want on these episodes? Not just like people who are traditionally archivists, but also people who are chronicling, the imagery and kind of like going through like, what is the importance of archival studies in pop culture, as they also relate to library studies as well, because it's, again, the Venn diagram is very overlapping. We can't necessarily separate ourselves from everything else. So knowledge and information management, all that stuff, we're all connected. It's all. But yeah, no, I am so happy that you came on, and you'll have to come back and we'll talk about more Magic the Gathering or whatever the hell you want to talk about. Quite frankly.
I know. I've been like really into Dragon Age lately, and I really want to delve more into what is going on with the books in that, because there's one of the main characters in Dragon Age 2 is like an author. And it's a really interesting sort of interplay with the plot, and it turns out that like he's the one telling the story of the video game, and it's like it's really cool.
Okay, well, we'll just jot you down for that then next time.
Yeah. There's even like a little mission that someone is pirating his books, and like you have to send somebody to like deal with this illicit publication, and it's like, oh my god, please, video games, do that more.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
No, I think we've just solidified your next appearance. I think we're good. So before we go, do you want to tell people where they might find you if they should so choose to?
Yeah, I am at book_Historia everywhere, and where I'm not book_Historia, I am book-Historia. So I also have a website, which is bookhistoria.com, all one word. I am a rare book cataloger at Type Punch Matrix, which is a DC based rare book dealer. So you can also find a little profile page on me there. And yeah.
And yeah, for me, you can always find me at darling_Sammy, SAMMY. I don't know why I keep spelling it, but I do. And yeah, you can go to Pop Archives, POP-ARCHIVES. I realized I wasn't actually spelling the archives part, which I feel like is the actual word that should be spelled in this case, but whatever. You can go to the website and check out all the articles I've written, many of which have inspired the episodes that you are watching on this channel. And you can just like this video, subscribe to the channel if you want. And if there's a suggestion that you have for a property that we haven't talked about, or that you would like to see, or just to bring it to my attention, please leave it in the comments. Or you can email me at popculturearchives@gmail.com. And yeah, so on behalf of Pop Archives, the channel and website, Allie, thank you once again for being on. And bye, everyone.